Are we ready to go? Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5:34 p.m., the special meeting, Wednesday, December 18th, special board meeting work study session. I'd asked everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I know. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, do we have quorum?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. All right. Item D, adoption of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to review this extensive agenda? Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Okay.
From a point of protocol,
Yes.
just so everybody's on the same page, when you move something or second something, could you turn on your microphone? And then if you could say that again, please, Mr. Thomas?
I will move it.
Thank you. And then whoever is going to second, the same protocol, so that we can make sure that we get the record correct, because it's very difficult to go back later and separate whose voice was whose if the camera wasn't on you. So
I
thank
will
you.
second.
Thank you. Motion by Trustee Thomas, second by Trustee Pelley. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries 7-0. All right. Public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
We do. We have 5. So
Okay.
that's 3 minutes each.
Yes.
Okay, up first is Kristen Lambert. And then after her will be Robert Frackleton.
Hi, so there's a lot of new faces up here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristen Lambert. I'm a senior at Villa Park this year. Aquatics has been a cornerstone of my life, and I've been involved since I can remember. I've proudly played water polo and swam for our school for the last 4 years, but it's really hard for our athletes to be proud of our program when it's been more than 4 years of disappointment and frustration while our program has been overlooked. I've spoken at several board meetings on this topic, yet here we are again, and every time my teammates, coaches, and I have poured our hearts out, but have been repeatedly dismissed. We need to take action this time. I'm here again, not just for myself, but for the entire Villa Park Aquatics community. Our pool was built in 1964, and it's the oldest in the district. It's falling apart and unreliable. We're supposed to be able to support the other schools in the district, but we can't offer that because of the neglect our facility has faced for so long. As I speak to you, our pool is broken, again, during our season, my senior season. Practices are canceled and schedules are thrown into chaos, leaving our athletes stranded and unable to train for the sports that they love. I've seen this happen before when my brother, who is a successful college swimmer, endured the same neglect while a part of aquatics at El Medina. The mistakes made with that pool, delays, mismanagement, and poor planning set back their entire program. I encourage you to go and watch a swim meet or a game to see what's happened to them. Don't make the same mistake for us. Don't let us suffer the same fate. I know I may never personally get to experience a fixed or new pool. However, it isn't just about me or Villa Park High School. It's about the incredibly talented athletes I've had the pleasure to watch grow in our aquatics program. It's about the club swimmers that a lot of us, including myself, grew up with. Some of whom's talent, like Lucy and Jay, who's brought them to compete at a national level, who will suffer if they're left without a place to practice. It's about the community, the kids who rely on swim lessons, the families who deserve a safe and welcoming space, and the future of Villa Park Aquatics. We've proven ourselves, and last spring the girls became CIF champions despite impossible conditions. Imagine what we could achieve with the bare minimum. We're not asking for luxury, we're asking for fairness. That's all we've ever asked for. This isn't about politics, this is about a commitment to the athletes, the students, and the community that you are supposed to represent. A commitment to those who call our pool home. Don't let us down again. Hear us, please. Take action and give Villa Park the pool we so desperately need, not just for us, but for those who will come after us and need a safe aquatic space. Thank you.
Up next is Robert Frackleton, and after him will be Bruce Furness.
Apologies for not being better well dressed. Came right from work. Good to see Mike Christensen back in that seat.
Robert Frackleton, class of '87, Villa Park High School. Also went to Saravilla, Villa Park Elementary. My 3 kids, we loved it so much we moved back. My 3 kids went through all the schools as well, and we are fully committed to Orange Unified. Love it. Aquatics got me the notice of some coaches. I got recruited. I went to UCLA. I was not a great student, but it got me there. It paid for it. Water polo was a great part of my life. Got more academically interested in college, went on to get my MBA, owned 2 businesses. Now my kids are following in the footsteps. We have had more Division I athletes come out of that pool at Villa Park than I would dare to say probably almost any other program in the district. We have 4 Olympians that came from that pool. Gavin Arroyo, Doug Kimball, Shea Buckner, Josh Samuels. It has been a program of success. It gets you up early in the morning. It gives you discipline. It gets you back there in the afternoon. You'll find that most recently that those teams have made the honor roll for academics as well as doing well athletically. And now we're fighting for enrollment. We got to keep our teachers employed. We got to keep the high schools full. And so we've got to compete. And having a 50-meter pool at Villa Park High School is going to allow us to compete. We're doing these wonderful showcases with Dr. Miller and Principal McCuson to attract people. But we can't do it if we don't have the facilities. And this is going to what's going to get us there. So please, please, please give us a pool, get us 50 meters. That's what we need, and it'll get the enrollment back up and keep us all happy and healthy. Thank you.
Bruce Furness is up next, and then afterwards, Eric Kulai.
Thank you for having me. I'm Bruce Furness, a resident of Villa Park for 20 years. I have been in Orange County since 1964. I'm a 20-year resident, as I said. I was around the sport. Have been around the sport of competitive aquatics for 67 years, so that gives you an idea of my age. And I've been around it as a toddler, learning to swim, as an age grouper, as a high school swimmer, as a college swimmer, an international swimmer, as a coach, a parent, and an administrator. I know a lot about the sport of swimming specifically, but I've had kids participate in other sports. I'm here to talk about the importance. I know you guys are going to do the right thing and build a pool for Villa Park. I'm not worried about whether you build a pool, it's whether you build the right pool. And I'm here to talk about the importance of building a pool that has flexibility and accommodation to the community. You know, I live here in this town. Our open space is our schools. We don't have a park, and we go to the Coffee Grove, and with City Hall's even in a shopping center. So we rely on those public spaces in our schools. You know, I think the importance of why a 50-meter pool is important is you can do multiple programming in the same space at the same time. You can have a learn to swim program. You can have water aerobics. You can have competitive aquatics. You can have water polo. You can have learn to swim programs, master swimming. They can all go on simultaneously. When you shrink that pool to 30 meters, you're pretty much identifying 1, maybe 2 uses. 30 meters for water polo, maybe you can squeeze in some swimming on the side. The variability and the flexibility of the facility changes a great deal. So I'd ask you, if you were to save costs, would you build a 50-yard football field? Would you build a 50-foot basketball court? That's what you're getting with a 30-meter pool. So I really encourage you to rethink of the programming and the ability of to accommodate multiple uses to the community at large at the same time. And you'll find that the programming per square foot of water is far greater if you have a 50-meter pool than if you have a 30-meter pool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Kulai from Villa Park. I live in Villa Park. I went to Villa Park High School. I graduated in 1983. I was a member of the water polo and swim program there. And I moved back here 30 years ago with my family. And a lot of them, well, all of them went through the swim program at Villa Park. Some of them through the water polo program. It's kind of, I graduated there. I became an industrial engineer. I dabble in economics. I just want to talk to you about value. If you were to, it's great to see some of our Measure K and Measure S people, especially Mike Christensen back up there. It was so great working with you. We built something at that high school that is a great value. If we were to choose, we chose science and math buildings, we chose science and math facilities because that's what the community wanted, and I think that it has returned the best value. We had an opportunity to build, we could have built a giant wood shop, but people would have been headed down here with torches and pitchforks. They would have said, what do we need a wood shop for? We built science and math. That's what the students needed. That was the best value. So let me talk to you about value and opportunity cost. And it doesn't really translate so well in a school district or a public works environment as it does in a business. But if you were to develop a property, you are beholden as the CFO or the financial department of that company to build something that returns the best value to the investors. Now, we don't have investors in the high school. We're not going to build something and turn around and sell it to a private high school. But if we were, we would sure get our money out of that science building. So, by the same token, we should really try our best to get the best value out of a pool, to get the best return on investment for our students, for our property taxpayers in the area out of that pool. Putting a pool in that's less than 50 meters is going to do a disservice to the community, a disservice to the students. It is not the best value. I don't want to lecture you or tell you about the economic concepts of opportunity cost. You probably all know that. I know Mike Christensen does. But the opportunity cost here and putting in a 50-meter pool is the only way to go. Again, putting anything less, not as long as 50 meters is a disservice to the community, and we've wasted an opportunity. That's all I got to say.
Jerry Olszewski? Jerry?
Good evening, board members. I think everybody's already said it about a 50-meter pool. I'm the CEO of Orange County Gold, and we primarily work out of Villa Park and use Orange High School. At this time, both those pools are down. They're in disrepair. Villa Park High School is beyond replacement. The pool was built in '67, so that makes it, 57 years old, probably older than most of us. It just needs to be replaced. Our community organization services every high school. There's swimmers, water polo players from Orange, Canyon, Villa Park, and El Medina. We don't want what happened at El Medina, where we waited too long and it took 4 years to build a pool. We want to be proactive instead of reactive. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to everybody who came out and spoke. We really do appreciate you taking your time. Okay, we will move on to the presentation. It is a non-action facilities presentation. So just to be clear, I know that there was a request that we make a decision tonight. This is not a, this is only a work study session. So there are no decisions that will be made tonight. That is not what is agendized. So just to be really clear, don't be disappointed when we don't take a vote, because this is not, this is a work study session. Okay? Salima Holquin, thank you.
Thank you, Board President Erickson, trustees and guests here, and those at home virtually. Happy holidays to all of you as we get ready for the holiday break. And this evening, as Board President Erickson said, we have a study session in which we will be providing the board with 2 presentations. During the July board meeting, staff was asked to bring back information regarding the costs to repair the pools at Villa Park, Canyon High, and Orange High. It was also requested that PBK review the scope of work from the Villa Park pool and come back with total project cost. Tonight, we will first start with Aquatic Designs, who was contracted to assess the current condition of our pools. Aquatic Design's scope of work does not include or provide a full architectural design estimate. Their findings are connected to repairs and options to extend the life of our pools. I will be turning it over to Michelle Gable from Aquatic Designs, who will be joined by our director, our Orange Unified Director of Maintenance and Operations, Mr. Steve Harlan. The presentation has been designed as a summary of the executive report of the pools provided by Aquatic Designs. After the presentation, Michelle and Steve will open it up to questions. However, if needed, please ask questions along the way. And I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Gable, and I am with Aquatic Design Group. We are an architecture and engineering firm that specializes in designing water. We have over 3,000 projects to our name, which is about 500 high schools, and in California, it's about 80% of the high schools. We have designed those as a firm. We are 40 years old, and we're happy to be here and help out, and I'm going to go through the history of some of the past help that we've provided to the district. Personally, I've been in aquatics for 20 years. I started out as one of those kids who loves the water, swam all through high school, became a lifeguard when I was a student at Stanford University, and then worked my way up in aquatics at the world-renowned Aquatic Center at Stanford. I had a lot of experiences there, both in and out of the mechanical and chemical equipment rooms, managing the equipment, working with staff, working with coaches, managing people, managing events, NCAA championships, U.S. Nationals, Junior Olympics, etc. During that time, I became a certified pool operator, which I have maintained throughout my aquatics career. I was there a total of 13 years, and then I moved home to San Diego, where I worked at a very large YMCA as an aquatics director, and then at San Diego State as an aquatics director. Came to ADG 5.5 years ago. I do assessments like what you have in front of you, about 20 a year, as well as work on design projects. So as I mentioned, a bit of the history of what ADG has been involved with the district is the El Medina High School pool was a project that we were consulting on for design and overseeing the construction, which became a 30-meter by 25-yard swimming pool. In April of 23, we were hired to do an audit of Canyon and Orange pools to identify the code and maintenance repairs needed for those pools at that time. And then we returned again in the fall here in 2024 to update those costs and include Villa Park High School in the assessment report. A couple things I want to mention, and I know you've heard it from some of these people coming up here, but these pools are, over 50 years old, and just like with classrooms, buildings, they age. We have Steve and his team giving a lot of love to keep these pools running, but everything kind of has a time limit, and typical life expectancy for a pool is about 50 years. And not only do the facilities age, but times change, needs change, programs change, et cetera. We don't build buildings the same way we did 50 years ago to how we do them today to meet the needs of students and the community. So knowing that, before we get into the code and maintenance items, I think it's really important to just talk briefly about the typical programs that the pools are meant to serve. The purpose of the pools is to serve the programs and the students, the teams, et cetera. In high schools, this is swimming, which is typically meets and practices, water polo, which is games and practices. We have physical education programs that come in and use the pools. We might have a basketball team, track team coming in and wanting to do physical fitness at the pool. And sometimes community uses, which oftentimes is local aquatic club teams, which may or may not be affiliated with your coaches for your sports teams at your schools. In the high school swimming category, we typically have 4 to 6 swimmers practice per lane. For safe diving from racing platforms, it's pretty commonplace in modern pools to have a 7-foot depth of water or greater for those dives. And for CIF, which is also National Federation of High School Association, we really want to meet those dual swim meet needs, which is 6 lanes for competition and 1 to 2 lanes for warm up and cool down. The width of these lanes is 7 feet minimum for CIF, and sometimes schools want to have larger meets at their sites, meaning tri-meets or championship meets, which need more lanes for both competition and warm up and cool down. For water polo, for CIF or NFHS, which is that National Federation of High School Association, our minimum field of play is 75 feet by 45 feet wide. And that's the minimum, which is the 25-yard course. It can be wall goals, which is also known as fixed goal, or it can be floating goal. Floating goal is preferred by most of the high school programs. And we are ideal water depth of 6'6" per CIF in that floating goal or fixed goal field of play. And we also, sometimes at high schools, desire to have a 25-meter floating goal field of play in addition to the 25-yard. For PE, for those schools that have pools, they're able to incorporate that California education of learn to swim or water safety. From site to site, just like with maybe the sports where you might have different numbers of teams and different numbers of students on each team, there might be a different number of kids in each PE program that's coming to the pool, and within that, a category of swimmers versus non-swimmers, and that relates to how much shallow water might be needed at a specific pool site. In California code, we can only go 1 foot of depth for 10 feet or a 10-foot run in the shallow end, which is the 3'6" to 4'6" end of the pool, which if it's a 25-yard width pool, that gives us 750 square feet of shallow water, which for non-swimmers is about 15 to 20 students. So each site might have a different need for not only your PE programs, maybe your water polo, maybe your swimming, depending on your student body. We take all that and we know that those are kind of the minimums and the typical high school programs, and we look at, we have these 3 pools, Canyon, Orange, and Villa Park. They're all 25 by 25, 25 meter by 25-yard pools. And we have this chart here where we can see the real hard data on what these pools are able to provide. We have lane numbers, square footage, etc. We see that in the 25 meter by 25 yard, we're at the wall goal 25-yard floating course, or not, sorry, floating, fixed wall goal water polo field of play in the 25-yard by 25 meter. Another challenge in that pool is just getting to the depths that we need to meet those 6 lanes for competitive racing starts off the racing platforms or safe diving from those racing platforms. You see, as we get to the 30-meter pool, we can now accommodate that 25-yard floating goal water polo field of play. You get to the 35, you're now meeting the 25-meter floating goal field of play. And when you get to the 50, you can now meet the 25-yard floating, the 25-meter floating, and the 30-meter floating goal field of play. The bigger the pool gets, the more flexibility you have with how much shallow water you can achieve to meet the needs of your shallow water programs. And I want to point out here that we have the 7-foot width lane numbers up here due to El Medina requesting the 7 feet width when we did efforts with them previously. It's also a CIF requirement that they be minimum 7, but a lot of times high schools prefer an 8-foot width lane. Also on this slide shows you that we have to have bathhouse buildings or fixtures to support the pools. California code requires that based on the water surface area, we have X amount of fixtures. And so as the water surface area increases, we increase the amount of fixtures we need. By that, I mean showers, toilets, urinals, sinks. The bathhouse gets bigger, gets more expensive. Sometimes at your sites, those can be met by the nearby gym locker rooms. They need to be within 300 feet of the pool, and that might suffice. But at some sites, it might not, or maybe those gyms are aging and you need modern facilities. But something to keep in mind when we talk about the pools, we always talk about what else supports those pools. Pools are there to serve the programs. Are we meeting the existing program needs? Are we meeting any future program needs? And what does that built environment look like, having those amenities in the bathhouse, the deck, storage, etc. Last I'll point out is that we have the operating costs on here for each of those size pools. As the pool gets larger, the annual operating expenses increase. This specifically is a number that's related to the utilities, the water, the chlorine, the gas, the electricity. Does not include the maintenance staff like Steve and others who are keeping the pools running, or any other staffing that might be needed, lifeguards, etc. We get to the capital costs a little bit later in the presentation. So knowing now that we have that environment that typically supports high school programs, we go back to Villa Park, Canyon, and Orange, and we took a hard look and observed, walking the sites with Steve, what's happening at these pools, what are the code issues, and what are the maintenance enhancement issues. As you can see, there's quite a few, and the report is very detailed on each of these. And there's also a lot of repetition. And the repetition makes sense because these pools are about the same ages, and every piece of equipment or pool component kind of ages in the same kind of life cycle. So even though some of these life cycles have come due and they've been replaced, certain items have been changed out, they come due again. We've now passed enough time that these things reoccur. At Orange High School, I want to point out that there was a renovation 21 years ago, which converted the gutter from a deep gutter to a rim flow deck level gutter. And some might say, well, how does Orange still have just as many code issues as Villa Park or as Canyon when things were replaced? And again, that points back to it's aging again. There's items like the deck, which are typically 20, 25 years life cycle. We're at 21 years. The other thing I want to point out here is that Villa Park High School, like you can see here, the pool finish and the pool deck are both listed as code items, but later on you might see like the finish for Orange listed in maintenance. That's because the conditions at Villa Park are truly a code concern, a safety concern. They're more dire than a maintenance concern at the moment. And the type of gutter that's at Villa Park is the deep. It's also at Canyon, a deep gutter, versus Orange, which did the conversion to the rim flow gutter. And I'll show you a picture later of what I mean by rim flow. But when you look at these projects, and this was all lumped together, code, maintenance, enhancement, it starts to make sense that you can't really a la carte a lot of these items. Not only could there be safety concerns for the students and the liability for the district, but sometimes the construction just doesn't allow it, or it doesn't make sense to separate these out. For example, that deep gutter, when you replace the deck at Villa Park, you have to put you have to be inside the pool to form the cantilever portion of the deck. So you would harm your pool finish in replacing your deck at Villa Park and Canyon. So you would do those projects at the same time. You can't say 1 year you're gonna do the Villa Park pool finish and then the next year do the deck. So these projects start to snowball in scope and really combine together. Another reason these things get combined together is just items trigger one another. You start pulling up the deck, now the health department, who does get involved in renovations, and it can be very messy, might say, well, the deck is up, you now have to replace the piping to meet your code flow velocity issues for today's standards, and it starts to snowball. And they look at it and say, you're not gonna probably replace this deck for another 20, 25 years, so this is the time. We need you to do this now. And they might make you bring things into compliance that you might be able to argue that is grandfathered, meaning when the pools were built, these were not code, these pools were code compliant, but code changes since have made them not compliant, but they might not let you do that. And you can see how these projects really start encompassing all of these items as you start to look at your repairs. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back one. The last thing I want to say on this slide is you'll see the diving from racing platforms is on each of these pools. And I alluded to it earlier that today's standards, we have a 7-foot depth of water for diving from racing platforms. We aren't able to achieve that in 6 lanes at all of these pools, and Orange is only 6-foot maximum depth, so we're not achieving it there in any of the lanes. One of the ways that we could change the depth at Villa Park and Canyon would be to convert to the rim flow gutter, which is at Orange. It gives you an extra foot of depth, and we would be able to achieve some lanes that would be safer for diving from racing platforms. So those kinds of things were taken into consideration. Not only just code, for example, at Orange I said 6 feet. The code says you have to have a no diving sign at every depth of pool that's 6 feet or less. That's all of the deep water at Orange High School. So looking at code, looking at maintenance and enhancements, we have quite large projects at each site. The last thing I'll say on maintenance, or I guess the first and only thing actually, is these items or numbers, estimated costs, were not meant to replace every piece of equipment in these repair budgets at each site. We looked with Steve and myself and my colleague Dennis at what is more dire in terms of equipment that needs to be replaced. It wasn't a blank plate replacement of all equipment at each site. It was which pump is in need, which is leaking, what's important. The one thing that was carried throughout all three was the electrical system. The electrical system at all three sites is the age of these pools, and even though Orange was renovated 21 years ago, the electrical system was not updated. So those costs were carried for all three pools. This leads us to these overall costs, and again, these were all project together, code, maintenance, enhancement, all in one project, including soft costs, including DSA pool-related costs, and we are in the $4.1 to $4.3 million range at each of these pools. Again, we're starting the life cycle over on many of the items, not all of the equipment, but certainly on pool finishes and pool decks. They're going to come due again in 20 years, which would be the same and true of like a new pool as well. But in a new pool, you'd have a new pool shell. These are using the existing pool shells that are there, and these are keeping these pools as 25 meter by 25 yard pools, which may or may not meet your needs. The thing that this is as Salima said, it's not an architectural design review, it's an assessment. So there are things that are not included. We don't know what those other DSA triggers would be, what those would cost, what might be the soil conditions at each site that might increase the costs for these projects. This just alludes to some of those lifespans of different pool components, which again helps you understand why Orange, after 21 years, would need almost just as much work as the other two sites. This is that photo of the rim flow gutter at Orange High School. It's a deck level gutter, and in that project also there was new plaster and tile and new deck and new equipment. As I mentioned, things trigger, like certain items trigger other items, and that really becomes a larger project that you can't necessarily a la carte complete to keep your pools going and give them some new life. This is meant to give an option that's not a traditional construction. So when we looked at those 4.1 to 4.3 million project costs, those were keeping the pools the same. We're getting rid of the plaster and tile, replacing the plaster and tile, repairing any cracks that might be in the below shotcrete. This is the Murtha renovation system. It is too soon in its life to actually know what the total lifespan of this system could be, because it's a newer technology. But we did look at the Villa Park site specifically just so we could take a deck number, like the existing square footage of one of these sites, how much deck that is, and plug that number in and use the Murtha system, which is basically take the plaster and tile off the pool, chip away at the shotcrete just enough that when you install the Murtha system, you're still keeping those interior dimensions of 25 by 25 to certify records, to be able to host your competitive sports. The system is PVC vinyl clad stainless steel walls, a stainless steel gutter, and then a PVC vinyl membrane as the finish of this system. And Murtha is an excellent company. They warranty their structural components for 25 years and their PVC vinyl membrane for 10. This amounted to $5.1 million. It took into account a $300,000 line item for chemical equipment upgrades just to bring everything into current code and good maintenance. From here, we also look at, well, we have these repairs of these three schools. What if we did a brand new 25 by 25 pool, not using the existing shell that occurs at either of these sites? So it's a brand new hole dug in the ground and all new pool components and equipment. This is a $9.6 million project cost. Again, this is a new start on a pool. It's, as a whole, it's a 50-year lifespan. Again, things replace in a life cycle manner, equipment, deck, etc. And we also added in here a 1,500 square foot bathhouse building in case it's needed, which is the minimal fixtures you need for that surface area of water. And we tried to just keep the mechanical space the same, but all new equipment. Of course, it's not site specific, so there might be things that come up in design that would increase the cost. More DSA triggers, site specific issues, soil conditions. As I noted before, the 25 by 25 may not be hitting all the program needs for the schools. So we looked at a 30 meter in today's dollars, conservative estimate here to do a brand new 30 meter pool, traditional construction, and include a 2,900 square foot bathhouse building, again, to meet the fixtures for the water surface area of the 30 meter and have some team amenities and such. $12.7 million. As I mentioned earlier, it's not site specific. It's excluding some of the things that might come up as you get into surveying the site and going into true design of the 30 meter at one of your
Can I interrupt you just for 1
sites.
second, just to
Yes.
clarify on this? Because I did have a question, maybe somebody else does too. So this 12.7 and 14.3, this is a generic replacement or 30 or 35 meter traditional construction pool. And we're talking, that would be what you would expect at Orange and Canyon, not at Villa Park, because you've already done the specific site
It could be Villa Park too.
analysis. Okay.
Yeah.
This then.
It's
this is
more
where I
like
get-
Orange County, Southern California. This is
Okay.
what we're seeing for the price of pool, new pool, new equipment, all the support amenities surrounding that.
Because there's a big difference between that and what our cost estimate is, which is $21 million for a 50-meter pool or whatever. So, and I think it's $19 million for a 30. So it's a lot different than what's up there. And that's where I need clarification, because that's a huge delta. That's a
Sure.
big difference between 12.7 and 19 million. So
Sure.
explain how
So I will say I have not seen what the next presentation entails, but these numbers are based on really recent bids that have come in Southern California, and this is also conservative. This builds in a padding so that if you don't do this tomorrow, these numbers can still hold up when you do get to design. We've seen some recent bids at like $330 per square foot for new pool and equipment, and those we had some inside knowledge that those contractors did light on their profit. And so taking into consideration what we typically see their profit be, it's more like $360 a square foot. If you look at your report, these were at $415 a square foot, giving us some wiggle room because we don't know what site conditions we might have at each site. And again, we don't know when you might be constructing these pools. But in talking to the other contractors, not just the ones that bid these recent jobs, this is the direction. It's the 400 square foot per dollar per square foot
this
range.
based on the pool construction cost as opposed to the entire project cost?
Yes, and that was
Okay.
something I was going to add too.
That's what I figured.
We're not
Okay.
an architectural firm in the sense of buildings, right? And so as you hire a building architect, they're going to be able to evaluate all of that support amenity and what that truly costs. I believe ours in there is $1,000 a square foot for building. And we kind of took a basic building that would support these size pools, but we didn't sit there and design it and plan it all out, right?
So obviously, a pool construction cost is substantial. I mean, we have more than just a pool construction. We have an entire project that we have to do to comply with DSA and all of those ADA, everything that we have to comply with,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
And
so
then-
it obviously, that makes sense then that the project cost is
Yeah.
substantially more. Okay, thank
And
you.
I haven't seen their stuff, but just I know that's how this goes usually when you
Thank
bring in the building architect. So moving on from that, so the next one is 35, and that's the 14.3 million with a larger bathhouse. Again, our fixture requirements increase because we've increased the surface area of the water. And that difference between the 30 and 35, they both support your swim team very well for dual meets and even beyond that. For water polo, you've got the ability to do fixed cage water polo for both of those pools. For 30, you can do 25-yard floating goal. 35, you can now add in 25-meter floating goal. And you also then, with the 35, can potentially have more shallow water. And you can actually see that kind of in the shading, the colors. The 30 on the left has significantly, not significantly, but some less shallow water than the 35 on the right. So you get more flexibility with your shallow water programs and possibly your other programs as well as you increase the size of the pool. This is a summary of those costs that we just talked about. I know it's a lot of information. It's a long report, but this does sum it up for what those conservative costs are in that aerial view without going into design and building design and such. We know that in order to figure out what to do next, you're balancing programmatic needs, whether that be existing only or existing and future desired needs, site opportunities or constraints, construction costs, and operating expenses. This goes back to what you saw previously, just recaps all the hard data of what these pools provide and kind of how that bathhouse grows and those operating expenses increase year over year, well, yearly over the life of your pool, and increase every time you increase the size of the pool. And then the last thing we did was we took a look at what are some of the schools, not necessarily that you compete against, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I know leagues kind of shift, but what's in the area, who has what size pool. We tried to identify, if we knew how old the pool was, how old the pool was. If we didn't know that, we knew how old the school is, and sometimes that means the pool is the same age as the school. In some instances, it's approximate. And then how many people have that 50-meter pool of this list? You guys are in here, minus El Medina, but Orange, Villa Park, and Canyon are in here. We found that there's 2 sites that still have a 6-lane by 25-yard pool, which is 15% of the pools on this list. 53.8% have the 25 by 25. And when you look at some of the years those pools were built, similar to what you guys are experiencing with these 50-plus year pools. And I've done assessments actually at some of those pools that are listed here. And they're doing the same thing you guys are. They're trying to figure out what happens next as these pools age. 35 and 37 is 15% of these pools, and 50 meter by 25 yard is also 15%. It also shows you just with those sizes how many lanes they're getting at the 7-foot depth, and the floating goal polo and the wall fixed cage polo. What are these pools providing? I know that was a lot of information, but feel free to ask questions if you have any. And they could be addressed to Steve, too. He's up here with me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the questions by board members. How about if I start with Trustees Yamasaki and Page, since you've gone through the presentations before, and then that may help the new trustees that are here guide their questioning, since they haven't been privy to any of the conversations yet or any of the presentations yet. Does that work? Okay.
Thanks. Well, thank you for your presentation. It's very detailed, and I really appreciate it. The one question I have about, you had mentioned something about health standards versus, I wanted to ask you during the presentation, but you mentioned health and safety standards that are different, or?
No worries. Let me see if I can kind of help you out with that. So code items, they're really based on the code, and some of that code is really designed around safety, right, for public swimming pools and for use of these pools by people, by students, staff, et cetera. Even if the code changed, and so since the pool was built, 50-something years ago, and the code was compliant with the code then, and it's not now because the code changed, it still might be, you don't look at it as, oh, we're still grandfathered, we're not going to change it. It's about possibly, is it a safe condition for the users? Is it a health issue? And for example, the plaster on a pool being ripped up or coming apart from the underlying pool shell could be a health and safety issue. You could cut your foot on that sharp edge. That one's a very particular safety issue, but you don't get out of the liability of some of these issues just because the code changed, is what I'm trying to say there. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that helps. And how is that different than, say, DSA? Like, does DSA have anything contribute to the pool or what we have to do?
DSA will look at the safety when you're going to them.
Okay.
But they don't analyze every pool code and
Okay.
really
I
understand
just
all
want
of
to
that
make sure
very well.
that that's understood by everybody. So,
Yeah.
okay. Go ahead, because I want to put together some of my thoughts. All right.
Thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned on the long list of other school districts that are also looking at their pool needs, and that you are working on some of those. Do you know how they're funding those projects?
I do not. These are assessments, so we haven't worked on the design. And usually in the design is when we learn, do they have a bond? What is their plan? I just know that Brea, Olinda, and Santa Ana have pools the same size, the same age, and they're struggling to keep them open.
Are they considering a 25 compared to a 30, 35, or 50?
They are not considering 25 by 25.
Okay.
The range was 30 to 50. Yeah.
And then this next question is mainly around like our own programming needs. So I don't know who that will be directed to, but how often do non-aquatic programs use our pool?
I wouldn't have that information, but we would be able to get that information back to you. I don't know, Steve, if you have some of that information that you could share from your experience.
Well, we do know a lot that the Villa Park and the Canyon High pools, especially like during the summer, are basically used from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. But how much is in-house and how much is out, I do not know.
Okay, so the reason why I asked was in the presentation, it discusses like shallow water and the need for that, and potentially like if we were to have non-aquatic programs like RPE use it, that they would need that space. So it's just something to consider, maybe like in a Friday packet or something, information of like how often not only the high school PE program uses it, but also if other programs use it during non-school time.
Definitely, we will get that information for you.
Yeah, and we didn't program out the pool, right? We haven't interviewed the coaches and everybody to really understand the needs at each site. But it's just, these are typical needs, right? And if a school is offering PE in their pool, how many of the kids know how to swim versus how many don't? And it can vary every site within a district. Yeah.
So is that shallow area part of a code requirement? That based on the footage, that we have of water surface area,
Yeah.
there's a certain percentage or an amount of area. I got that impression from you, but could you confirm?
Sure. So you could have an all-deep pool, technically. As a high school, you could build one, be a special purpose pool, where you're skipping this concept of shallow water. Most schools don't because they have potentially PE programs that need some shallow. And you have to have a 3'6" shallow end unless you pursue a special purpose. In the code, we have to go 1 feet for a 10-foot of run to get from the 3'6" to the 4'6", which is 10 feet. And then we typically have a 75-foot length or a 25-yard pool. And so just in that kind of method,
Right.
you end up with the 750 square feet. By no means would you have to do that, but you need a larger pool to start being able to accommodate more shallow water in a 25-yard pool.
Right, but so it sounds like the shallow portion of a pool is not required.
It's not required.
Okay.
Then you pursue a special purpose pool, special permit and special use, and
So-
you're very locked in on the uses of that
Okay,
special
so it
pool.
requires a special permit and it's got an exemption from having the shallow area.
It's a different process, yes.
Okay.
It's possible, but it's a different route.
Okay, well, just good to know. We're here to get information. Thank you. Sierra has a question.
Okay, why don't we go to Trustee Vane? I know you were still putting your questions together, Trustee Yamasaki. Trustee Vane, do you have some questions?
Just one, and I'm again not sure who to direct it to. I'm wondering if you can share with me a little bit about tournaments. So, how many lanes does a tournament take, and are we limited in our ability to host those tournaments? What does that look like?
So are you referring to swimming and water polo?
All of
Just
it.
water polo? Okay. So with the dual meets, which is your common CIF meet, you just need the 6 lanes for competition, which would typically be the deep water, right? And then 1 to 2 warm-up lanes. And the deck, pretty minimal deck. You're not bringing a huge crowd. You might have some seating for spectators, some restroom, for spectators. But when you start getting into wanting to host tri-meets and championship meets, you're growing the number of teams that are there. So you have those individuals on the teams, you have the coaching staff, then you have all the spectators. And you start to need a larger deck and more water, frankly, to host those. From a water polo perspective, most of your matches are going to be just one team against another. You start holding a tournament, you do typically need a much larger pool because you might have a course that's in floating and then like warm up and cool down lanes, or even like a little practice course on the other side of that to be able to have people have water to warm up. Sites that have more than one pool have like a different pool for warming up purposes before they go into a match. Again, it depends on how many teams are in the tournament. You got the students that are on the teams, the coaches, then the spectators. Everything grows in terms of how do you fit all these people at your site. A lot of sites that host a lot of big swim meets and tournaments even have like grass areas or nearby areas where they call it tent city, where there's all these pop-up tents and everything. It grows. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yes,
The
thank
needs
you.
grow as you decide to host these larger events.
So I see that Laguna Beach is just approved a pool, and they're in the process. And that their pool is approved for, I believe, $19 million for a 40-meter pool. Does that sound like something? I don't know if anyone looked into it, but that's what I saw on their website. And they have a plan to talk to the community. Are we going to be developing a plan like that to let the community know before we even make any kind of commitment?
Well, we can. I think at this point, we're still in this information gathering stage based on the videos I've watched of other board meetings when some of these questions were asked, right? So we're gathering this information, bringing it back. It sounds like that their outreach is based on a decision, right? They're communicating. I haven't seen what they've put out.
Well, I think their initial project proposals overlapped with reaching out to the community, and I don't think we have done that yet. And I'm just wondering, we are going to go down a road that's going to be kind of, committing to something, but we haven't done this part yet. And I've asked at other meetings if that's something that we could do. And I haven't seen anything, no outreach to the community.
I wasn't aware that you had asked for that, but
Yeah.
that's something that we can do.
Okay.
I'm actually pretty intimate with Laguna Beach and that whole process. They only have the one pool that serves the city and the school, and they joint use. And they've been trying to work closely together to come to a resolution, and they're landlocked because they're putting it in the same site that they already have. And it got up to a 45-meter pool.
Okay, 45.
It's still, it's very delicate. It's a very interesting situation, but it is very community involved and school district, driven by the school district at the moment. And the pool might be shrinking because the site is so tight. Okay. And to the point of hosting, events, you want to be able to host them properly with the site amenities and support built environment that you have.
The one thing I had asked for in the past too is a consideration to see if we did something new on an alternative site. I wanted to see the cost for that, or if it's going to be similar to this or is it going to be lower? You know, because I know that our community really wants a 50-meter pool, and not just Villa Park, but in general, I think our district probably should get one at some point. But I'd like to see the cost of how much a 50-meter pool would cost at an alternative site that is mutually, that everyone can use.
So,
And I know we had talked about it during our facilities master plan at one point as well.
so we can get you that. They haven't prepared that, obviously. As she said in there, the two sizes that or three sizes that they proposed, the 25, 30, and 35 or whatever. So we can ask them to give us that number on a 50-meter, but these are not site-specific. So until a site is identified and soil tests are done and all the things that PBK has had to do to refine their proposal, you know, until somebody's on board and does the borings and all that stuff, it's going to be an approximate number.
Okay.
So, but we
You're
can
talking about
get you
for
that.
Canyon and Orange or another unknown site?
Well, I think
Well,
she's a site to be named later, is the impression I
Yeah,
got.
I'm not talking about another school, just to make, we have some
Anywhere.
properties that, you know, potentially we could use that, those areas. I don't know. That's a discussion that we can
So-
have at
so it's
some other
all-
point. But I just kind of feel like I need to weigh everything together
Mm-hmm.
in order to, like, make a good decision
Sure.
at some point.
Sure. And a lot of things come into play. How much parking is there? What
Right.
utilities are there? You know, just all kinds of things, right? So it would be a general number, which is what they're providing on these other sizes, which is why this price that they're quoting is different than the numbers that you've seen for Villa Park, because that in-depth research has been done, and so that there's a confidence level now with the numbers that we've been given from PBK and NEF on their research. So the numbers that Aquatic Design Group would provide will be, you know, kind of a ballpark as opposed to a hard number. But we'll absolutely get that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, to, you know, convert an old pool and to put in a new pool, the difference is if you had a site that was, you know, didn't have anything on it, like
Sure.
what the cost would be or the difference.
And I don't know, do you
Yeah.
happen to know that number? Have you already made that presentation somewhere? Because you said this is a compilation of, many bids that you've opened, and this is how you've come up with the numbers. Do you know offhand what the 50-meter pool, what you would use as a number for a 50-meter pool?
I wouldn't feel confident
fine.
right now.
No problem.
But I know it's north of 14 million.
Okay.
And since you mentioned the 19 million too on Laguna Beach, and I know that there's this presentation after me, that is it sounds like it was listed as a 40, but to my knowledge it was a 45.
Okay.
With concrete, like built in, like fancy spectator seating, and 2 buildings, brand new, on site, just for reference for people. Yeah.
That to the point of, it depends on where you end up, right, as to what you're going to need to build and what people want. So, but we can get you that general number. We'll work with them to get that for you, and we will get it for you and everybody else.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Just to be clear, we don't really have a question and answer period. However, just to be clear also, yours is an assessment report. You're giving us an assessment and you're giving us more generic numbers. The next report is going to be specific as to the Villa Park pool. So that's going to be the PBK report. That's going to be site specific. So I don't know if that matters, but I just want that to be out there. So this is the more generic report, and it has to do with all the assessment of all 3 schools and as they exist today, as opposed to what is the project going to be. Because again, you gave us construction costs, estimates in a generic pool. That isn't a project cost for Villa Park, obviously, because that's coming next. Is that fair?
Yes, that's
Okay.
a fair recap for everyone's help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still have questions for her, to which I think the answers would be very relevant to the discussion you all just had.
All right, I don't want to open it up to a big question and answer. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question really quickly?
I just want to point out that if you were going to build a swimming pool at, say, the driving range, there would be liability and cost in getting students from each school there, so you need to consider that
Okay.
cost. But also, the numbers that you put up there are neighboring schools and what size pools they have. It seems to be sort of irrelevant, because if we need a new pool, we should really know what the size of the pools that have been built in the last few years and the number of pools that are going to be built, have been built over the last few years, and what pools are going to be built in the next 5 years, what the size of those are, and why those districts put in 50-meter pools and have totally ignored the idea of a 25-meter
Right, and we have actually had some information previously on what pools different districts have chosen to install. Initially, a few years ago, people were going towards 50-meter pools, and in the recent past, at least the report that we had last time, was that districts are tending to go more towards 30, somewhere between 30 and 37 or 40,
Yeah.
I guess. So that seems to be the trend right now. Is that fair to say?
I would say that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah. And just like with, I said buildings change and needs change within those buildings and classrooms, same things happen to pools, right?
Right.
So the trend is to move away from those 25 by 25 pools, going to that 30 to 40 range, and in some cases 50 if it meets the needs, and suits the community.
And I'm sure, like you just mentioned something about city school in Laguna Beach. Huge difference when you have a city like Irvine, for instance, or Laguna Beach, who's pitching in, and you're doing a joint project, and you have, for instance, if the city of Villa Park could pitch in and have a joint project, that would be fantastic. Maybe the city of Anaheim can do that. But that's not where we are, so we need to deal with the situation that we have at hand, which is our district at this point. We got to look into what our funding sources are and how we do that. Right now, you're speaking generically about where we're at today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I make one more point? You should,
I really don't think we should start this precedence because
there's just no way, no how a 50-meter pool is going to fit at Laguna Beach High School.
Okay,
It's too small.
we're not talking about that right now, but thank you. Okay,
We did talk about it earlier.
talking about funding.
Yeah.
you're more than welcome to email us afterwards with your questions, and I would encourage that.
Okay, who's next with questions? Okay, Trustee Pelling?
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. Really, it's just a follow-up for our staff from Trustee Page's request. If we could get just an idea of if we have charged other groups to come in, which I know we do, to use our pool for, the clubs or whatever. Can we get just an idea maybe over the last couple years how much we've made, how much money? Because I know I hear that a lot from people. Oh, we could be a moneymaker. We could charge people for using this pool and have other activities there. But I'd just be curious to know what so far, in the last 2 years, maybe we've made it at our different sites with the pools we have, which we know are not in great shape. So, thank you.
We can get that information.
Thanks.
Dr. Glass?
Again, thank you for the presentation. It's not light reading, so thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, the code to bring the pools generally to compliance, about $6 million for each of the pools, together. Would that be about right?
Maybe factoring in those things we don't know, right?
Right. And that's
Sure.
the second part of it, because if I understand your presentation correctly, once you get in there, it may be opening us up to other issues when it comes to, coding and things like that, when it comes to
DSA,
the city, DSA, what have you, okay, right? So then at the same time, I had a note that it's about if we start a new project and it's 50 meters, off the top, probably about $10 million just to get it started. I think I read that in there.
Well, we don't have the capital cost for 50 in here.
Okay.
I know someone asked the question specifically, and it's definitely north of 14 million.
Okay.
We have the 30 and the 35, and then the 25 by 25, and the Mirtha system for the 25 by 25.
Right. Okay. And so for us in this conversation, which is fact-finding, I understand that, what we're looking at is these three options potentially before we get to the PBK presentation. And just to understand that this includes CIF regulations and also USA water polo, or is that separate within this conversation?
If you stay with the 25 by 25, you check some of those boxes for those entities, but maybe not all, right? You don't have 25-yard floating goal water polo, for example, which is preferred in CIF. When you get into the 30 and the 35, you check more of those boxes that meet those standards. The 50, as their presentation, it's going to check all of those boxes.
And so I think Trustee Pelly's question, I've heard from community members who are talking about doing certain types of events with USA. The Olympics are coming. How do we attract them to the area? Time frame wise, would it even be possible to complete the pool within the time frame of the next Olympics in Los Angeles?
2028. It's possible if you move fast.
Okay.
But you got to figure out what's the right size, you know.
Okay.
And that, honestly, that happens everywhere. I just went to Malibu on Monday for their pool, for their district. They were going to make a decision that night of what size pool. They couldn't make it. They got to bring the community in. They're not ready. It's a big decision.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I do have a question for Ms. Holguin. As for the funding resources, I'm interested because I believe there was a bond, Proposition 2, that was passed just this cycle, north of around $10 billion. So, Ms. Holguin, my question for you is how much, in terms of restricted facilities funding, will the Orange Unified receive from Prop 2, which is around $10 billion in total?
So that is actually not an issue before us, and that isn't something that they have been directed to. That's going to be a subject for a future meeting in terms of finances and how we can finance these things. If there's any way that you know any of that, I know at this point it depends on the campus, and Villa Park wouldn't qualify for any matching funds at this point. But I don't know if you're prepared to go forward with those questions since you were not asked to prepare them.
Well, and I think if the questions are going to be directed to me, then I could refer them to whoever I think is best prepared to answer them. But briefly, the eligibility at Villa Park has been used up with all the modernization that's been done there, just like the other high schools. So the money that comes, just for your reference, from Prop 2, it's basically matching funds. So if we spend money, we will get some percentage of that back, and that's what Prop 2 works. It's not just we get money because they passed a bond. So they incentivize districts to pass their own bonds to help pay for these improvements, and then they'll reimburse some amount of money up to a certain amount per student. Once all the student eligibility is used up, then there's no more money that comes with that.
So even when the bond has already passed, Villa Park High School's state matching funds is already completely depleted. Is that correct?
That is not.
Okay.
Prop 2 will fund that, but the pool would not fund additional.
He's asking our eligibility has been met, so we don't qualify for any more. We haven't received the matching funds.
Right.
We'll get those
We're
from
going to get
Prop
those
2.
from Prop 2.
Right.
So that's the...
But we're not eligible for, so in other words, if we decide to spend $20 million at Villa Park High School, we will not qualify for any matching funds because we've already met
the maximum.
Maximum.
That is my understanding. There are, in the process of developing new regulations for Prop 2. The Office of Public School Construction is in the process of doing that. The legislator approve it, but at this point, we're not eligible for any more money for doing this pool at Villa Park, or pools at any of the schools, quite frankly.
At this time, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I think only time will tell. Well, I'm so glad that we're working with such dedicated and experienced architects. So I see here in regards to neighboring school pools, sites such as Garden Grove High School has a 25-meter pool, and that was developed in 2009. I'm under the understanding that Garden Grove High School currently does not have the size to expand beyond a 25-meter pool. So from your experience working with school sites here in Orange County, in Southern California, how common is it for school sites that have the opportunity to expand, such as Villa Park High School, such as El Medina, to expand beyond the standard 25 to perhaps even a 35 or 38-meter pool?
It's very common nowadays. The trend, as I mentioned, has been to go larger to support the program needs. A lot of times it's moving the location entirely on the site, having to maybe take away a sand volleyball court or a basketball court and then find a way to bring that back so that the students aren't losing those things. But it opens up the possibility when you're really landlocked to have that larger pool. It's happening a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just do have a simple comment because I did see, at least in regards to a 50-meter pool, the expenditures, at least in terms of the operation cost, is around $274,000. I'm under the understanding that electricity is a major component of those expenses, but thanks to Villa Park High School and other school sites having, I do believe it's solar panels above our parking lots. I do believe that is enough. This is from what I've heard thus far. That should be enough electricity to fuel both our gyms and pool sites. So I think that does bring down, at least in regards to that figure, brings down massive, massive numbers. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
That is a statement that would have to be confirmed by our staff. I do not know that that is true or is not true. So if we could, before that goes out into social media world, could we please have that confirmed? That is one of the questions. Obviously, on a 25-meter pool, the annual utility operating cost is $96,000. It then triples when you get to a 50-meter pool. So it's basically, almost $300,000 a year to operate a 50-meter pool. There must be other costs. Those are utility costs, but there's obviously maintenance costs. And I would be curious, I would assume our maintenance costs right now are very high because it seems like we're out there all the time now trying to plug holes because we do have pools that are not in good shape and they're not doing well. I do hear a lot, and I've seen Villa Park's pool as well. I know that it's in terrible shape. I feel like I get nervous when I hear that because I hear how bad it is and how unhealthy it is and kids are going to get hurt. And then in the next breath, I hear that we're hosting a tournament there. So I'm not really clear. It seems like it's in good enough shape that we still keep hosting tournaments. Is it your opinion and your assessment that is what we're doing right now is okay, that we are safe to do that? Because if we're not, we need to be talking about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we don't ever really tell anyone to close their pool based on what we see. The health department can do that. We as a firm don't do that. We can point out some of the safety issues, right, and some of those code issues. And, walking the site, did I think today it needed to be closed and tomorrow there'll be no more students there? No. But the point of the list of all the items is to really observe what needs to happen.
We need to take care of it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to close tomorrow. We need to take care of the problems that we have, though.
And those problems might just force a closure unexpectedly, right? Because something's leaking, something breaks, that snowballs into that, right? So, when you least expect it, right? Do we have 2-3 years while these pools keep running to be planning for the next pool? That's a common situation for schools, is how do we keep the Band-Aids, the duct tape, the glue going? And if I could circle back one thing too on the electricity and gas, the single biggest cost of those 5 utility items that make up those numbers is the gas to heat the pools. There's a movement to electrify and to find ways to heat pools with electrification. We're not really there yet. It's going to be a long process to get there. And in new construction, it's mandated even, but it takes up a lot of space on site to be able to have the heat pumps and such to electrify, and it's very expensive. Okay. And so the gas actually is cheaper.
And that's the main cost for utility operating.
Mm-hmm, that outweighs far the water, the chlorine, the electricity of the operation of those pools.
Okay, so I just kind of want to summarize in terms of what we need for our programs. In order to do a dual meet, we would need a minimum of 8 lanes, 6 and then 2 warm-up lanes. To do a tri-meet, we would need 10 to 12 lanes. Is that right?
I think it's 8 competition, and then 10 to 12.
Okay.
With the warm-ups, cool downs, yeah.
And then to do a championship, we would need 12 to 14 lanes.
Correct.
And currently we have 11 lanes, and a 30 meter would provide 13 lanes, a 35 meter, and I'm assuming a 33 meter would be somewhere between 13 and 15 lanes, right?
Yes.
Depending on
And these are the
how wide they
7-foot
were.
width lanes.
The
Yes.
7, okay. High school meets, they don't run long courses, right? They just run short courses, so it's always going to be the 25 meter. That's how you would
25
run it. And as far as I know, the only thing that would require something more than 25 is when you have, and you had it on there, the floating goals for a water polo tournament. And then you would be able to do that with a 30.
With the 30, you could do the 25-yard floating.
30, okay.
And with the 35, you could do the 25-meter floating.
Okay. So in terms of what a 50 meter offers, it offers more than what we need as minimum requirements. What does it offer? What do you get out of 50 that we need, I guess, versus what do we want?
And I mean, to be fair, we didn't ask specifically coaches and everybody's needs for this, but I can tell you that a 50 will meet all of your high school needs and more. And the reason to have a 50, unless you just have endless money, is if you're trying to train long course, 50-meter swimming, which is not a high school event, but is a club sport desire, or club swimming desire, I should say, during a certain time of the year. And if you literally need, like this one is 23 lanes, because you have so many kids that practice at once at your school, that you need to get everybody in and out of the water within 2-3 hours so they can go home and do homework.
Okay. So
those are like the two things that kind of check why would you need a 50.
Okay.
And that's very dependent on each school and each site. How many, again, we didn't ask how many kids do you have in this team and that team, and kind of you can actually program out the pool, right, based on the numbers that you have for your programs.
So you don't have the number of programs for each
for Villa Park,
aquatic
for Canyon,
program
Orange.
for either Villa Park, Orange, or Canyon?
Not part of this assessment. I know when we did El Medina, we did work like that with community and with the district for specifically El Medina, but we have not done anything overhauled with everyone.
And they ended up with a 30-meter pool. And does that accommodate their aquatics program?
From what we've heard, it's meeting the sport needs, but the PE is feeling squished.
Okay.
And that's just what we've heard through basically my boss, Dennis, talking with people after El Medina was put in place, and now it's been in operation for a while.
Okay. We have heard some comments about El Medina taking 4 years. You were part of that. That was also during COVID. Is that fair to say? That
Yes.
There wasn't a lot of things going on during COVID, and there was cost escalation that was happening in the middle of that we had no control over. So there were a lot of issues with the El Medina pool that we never want to repeat, but also were also due to the circumstances that were beyond our control as well. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
And even just in 23 to 24, the price per square foot of pools has escalated a ton just in the last year.
Yeah.
Like almost $100 a square foot. And that's not
certainly
even
escalated
that's
since
not
we did
even
that.
COVID really related, but because you're thinking about 23 to 24, sure there's some effects, but it's just inflation.
Yeah, it's escalated a lot. I think everybody on this board before and now were shocked by, it was huge sticker shock. Okay. See what else I have. Oh, the question I did have is on the either the MRFA or the doing like for like. Does that give you the ability or flexibility to do any changes, additions, or anything to like the deck space where we have, bleachers, that sort of thing? I mean, can we do anything to make the aquatic center more user-friendly or better if we're just basically using the same footprint and the same size, let's just assume we were fixing what we had, would we still have the ability to enhance the space in a way that might be helpful?
Orange has the largest deck of the three sites. So, the larger the deck, the more opportunity there might be to build maybe more permanent seating to enhance the venue. We didn't take into any of those costs into account into our estimated costs. But certainly, yes, there's always the ability to improve the site. And we could have gone deeper into that. We could have put a video board at every site or something like that. We didn't do all that. We tried to stick to kind of the basics of modern pool and keep bringing it into code and code compliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have anything else. Anybody else? Okay.
I do have a question about the programming. I was wondering if we can get, like, how many programs are at each of the schools, how many kids are in each program, and I also wanted to find out, like, the time and hours used for our kids in the programs. I'm not including outside entities, and just a general idea of what their practice schedule is, because I hear that sometimes, practices are extended or so. And then also the time of year. Like, you can give me a snapshot of what is used this week, but what about, in 3 months or 6 months? Like, I know that's going to vary too, depending on the season. So I just want to get an accurate assessment of how our athletes are using the pools at our schools, including PE, versus outside entities using our pools.
Sure, we'll get that.
Okay. And then if we can get the information that was requested earlier, how many hours are outside entities using our pools and when, and how much money they're paying.
Yes, we'll get that as well.
Okay.
And also, well, you're not doing this, but in terms of Villa Park, where will those students practice then once the construction starts? And can those pools accommodate those teams? Because I know Elmo had to practice at Villa Park, right? When that was being built, I believe, or at least during the time that they were able to swim, since part of it was COVID. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Trustee Thomas, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple quick questions. Is there a maximum depth for a new pool or standard depth?
If you're including diving, the sport of diving in the program, and it's 1 meter diving, for example, you would have a 12'6" depth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just one thing you mentioned towards the beginning about Orange High School pool, 6 foot maximum depth, is that what you said?
So at Orange, yes, the maximum depth in the pool is, the deepest portion is 6 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
We don't have a diving program though, right? So.
Correct. To my knowledge, there's not any service for diving right now. There was in the past. Some of those boards have been, they've been removed or taken offline, if you will, at Canyon.
Mm-hmm. But is it generally something schools would do? No? I mean, is
it's
it
kind
a CIF?
of moving away. It depends on the
that's what I've
school,
heard
but
too.
for the most part, we're finding that people are not offering it,
Mm-hmm.
liability reasons, and there's just so many unique facilities that really cater to divers and that club diving concept that they're likely to just go there anyways, and then they might still compete for your school under your
Right.
name, but never really practice with your
Okay.
school.
I just want to make sure that that's not something that is in part of our consideration, being that we don't have diving in our schools, and it's not something, from a liability standpoint, I can't speak for the entire board, but I think, it may not be something that we would even be entertaining at this point, so.
And if we did a full design, we would vet through every program option, and it would include diving if necessary. But I think I've heard that everyone's maybe going to Orange Coast College mostly for their diving needs.
Okay.
Okay. Trustee Bain?
Hi. I am wondering if you can talk to me about the water polo goals and help me understand the wall versus floating. Like I see that Los Amigos High School doesn't have any goals. Does that mean they don't have water polo? I mean, some of them have both.
Sure. Oh man, I was gonna change to the next slide because I had a last slide that might be helpful. It
Great.
actually shows the field of play and some of the goals, but fixed goal or cage goal is literally attached like by the wall and into the deck. And people do that in these older pools where they don't have the option to have a 25-yard course between the front of each goal, so that with, plus then you have the goal, and so then you need additional square footage. It's about 6 feet per goal from like front to back. So you could see how when you want to have the floating course, you have the addition of both goals, you're now, needing that larger pool.
But like, why would some of these have both?
Why would they have what? I'm sorry.
Both goals. So they have one attached to the wall and.
Oh, so it would, well, two things. I was trying to show that you're getting only wall goal polo in some of these smaller
this
pools.
is what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you have the option to go floating because you could do both.
But in the sport,
but when you get,
everyone who plays it wants the floating.
typically they want the floating. They don't prefer the wall goals. The wall goals are also very heavy. It can take like 4 students to lift them and put them in place and take them out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to store them somewhere.
They also have to be, everything. A lot of storage needs in aquatics. Yes.
And if you're swimming, right, you definitely remove these goals.
Yes, they're only in for water polo purposes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you can have in a bigger pool, you can have a floating goal course and like run a net across behind one goal and have like swimming on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so that the bigger the pool gets, the more disparate programs you can operate simultaneously. Obviously, there's a lot of configurations. And even in those larger pools, you might want 3 different teams. If you have freshman, JV, varsity, practice at once, they're now all restricted because of the size of maybe a 50-meter pool to having fixed goal or cage courses lined up 3 in a row with some buffer in between.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
I do just have one more question. So I do believe you worked with Medina's Aquatic Center. Is that correct?
I personally did not, but our firm did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your firm, I do have a question in regards to your studies into the several other school sites here in Orange Unified. Which school has the smallest pool deck in terms of ratio to pool size, if you're aware of that, just as a matter of clarification?
I'm not sure.
Okay, no worries.
I know Orange is pretty expansive, and Villa Park is probably the next largest, and then Canyon after that.
Okay.
I could look further into it, but off the top of my head, I'm not and I don't know what the square footage of Medina is for their
no
deck.
worries. Okay.
But
well, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I'd just like to thank also Trustee Yamasaki for, offering the question regarding the size of our aquatic programs in Orange Unified, because I do believe Orange High School, their pool just broke down, I believe just last week, and it is under construction for the next couple weeks. I'm sorry, under construction, but under repair. In regards to a 50-meter pool or perhaps even a 35-meter pool, for a pool or a size that is large enough, we can accommodate 2 programs at the same time. So looking in future years, if Villa Park High School receives a 50-meter pool and we want to house both maybe even Canyon, Medina, and Orange, we could house 2 programs at the same time and practice mutually. So I think that's something to consider as well, and I am looking forward to see the size of other programs, aquatic programs in Orange Unified as well. So thank you.
And if I could correct myself real quick, I had it backwards. So Orange is the largest deck, then it's Canyon, and then Villa Park is the smallest.
Villa Park's smallest? Okay, thank you.
Did you do any analysis of the campuses themselves in terms of like accessible parking, that kind of thing, or were you looking specifically at the pools?
We did not do other campus amenity analysis.
Issues. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just was curious. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Are we good?
I have one more question. This is actually probably for our staff, or maybe you can interject. So I asked for information about the programs that our swimmers, our aquatics uses. I wanted to know about the tournaments too, because I don't have a swim person, child in the past, so I want to know about tournaments. How many do we anticipate a year? What kind of tournaments, swim meets? Is it water polo? How many teams come to a tournament? The time frame, and anything that's related to that, so that we understand how often these pools are going to be used, and if there's extra costs. Like, so if we do say rent it out, but the heating of the pool may cost more than what we actually get. I want to know, like, how much, like, if there's a way to calculate that.
So I think what you're asking for, but please correct me, tournaments that are school-specific as opposed to tournaments that are outside groups. Is that the...
I was
Dr.
thinking...
Vane's nodding, but I'm not sure that...
I was, well, see, that's, and I'm not clear, like...
Yeah, so we'll get, get that information, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's, more information is better.
Yes,
so we
exactly.
will endeavor to do that for you.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
And if I could just say real quick, generally pools operate in a subsidy. Rarely does a pool actually make more than it costs. So it's always a matter of what is the subsidy we are willing to continue to have over the course of the life of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, how do we meet the program needs?
Right.
So I don't remember who, someone mentioned that we might have a diving program at the college. So I'd also be interested to see information on our relationship with Santiago Canyon College, and if we have use there, and if there's programs of OUSD that are there, something like that, or what could be used there.
All right, thank you very much. We
Cool for
appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Steve. They will remain here in case there's any additional questions after PBK finishes their presentation. I know some of the information that they presented after PBK, there might be some additional questions that arise from that. So PBK will now provide you with their presentations, and PBK's presentation is specific to Villa Park. We have Bruce O., Principal Architect from PBK, here to present the updates of the architectural scope of work that was requested during the July board meeting. He is joined by Nick Murray and Tom Warrington of Neff Construction. And finally, also Mark Aranda, our project manager for Orange Unified, is also here with us as a district representative who has been assisting with the initial design phase. I'm going to turn it over to Bruce.
Happy holidays, district leaders, board members. I'm Bruce O., Principal Architect with PBK. Here with my team here. Feel free to ask questions, and we can kind of answer any questions as we go through this presentation. Last time we presented was back in July, and this slide pretty much summarized what we presented, which is our discovery of all these color lines that you see that were unforeseen conditions that added to the potential cost of the project. We have the red, which is kind of the solar voltaic line. We have the blue, which shows the high water tables. We also have a gas line in brown, and also an orange line. That's the power line connecting to the new building 500. All of these were in the original proposed locations of the pool. And in the subsequent slide, you can see almost a year ago, when we were here presenting, the estimated project cost was running about 15.8 for a 50 meter. And then, since then, we have uncovered about roughly $3 million of additional unforeseens. And we've actually between July and now, we actually successfully had a meeting with DSA to help reduce some of those costs. We got an exemption on the pool without having to deal with the high water table, only the building. So that kind of saved a little bit over there.
Sir, can I just ask you, I just want to
Yes.
make sure, on the original project cost of 15.8, where it says as of 12/13/24, it should be 12/13/23.
Exact. That was the typo we
Okay,
caught
I
afterwards.
just want to make sure everybody understands.
Yeah.
It didn't go up in a few days.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, which brings today's cost to 18.8. But factor in the escalation as we discussed previously. It's going at a very high rate, and to the mid-rate of construction right now, we're looking at 21.7. And there's possibility to fast track it. We can also study that if that's the board wishes to, and we can have our contractor to speak more to that if needed. But as of now, the latest updated cost, mid-rate construction, is to 21.7 for the entire project cost for a 50-meter. We've studied different options of locating the pools at various locations and what that potentially cost-saving impact could be. So for option one, the original location, you can see starting with the 21.7 as a basis, you can see by downsizing the pool, you can save those numbers based on the selections that you've selected. Option two is moving the pool to the current pool locations, so we can save some demolition cost, and then and also minimizing the gas relocation. And then option three is rotating the building so that the building is above the high water table, and then we can also have additional savings. In the subsequent slides after these, we'll be going into a little bit deeper dive for each one of these options, sub-options, 1B, 1C, 2B, 2C, 3B, 3C, and so on and so forth. So for the option 1B, if we to reduce the 50-meter down to 38-meter, there's a little bit potential saving of $600,000, which can bring the overall project cost down to $21 million. And that is, the reduction of some of the retaining walls that we can save, and also maybe the deck. Did I miss any?
Can you
33? Yes.
remind us why we chose that original design location as opposed to the existing pool location? I can't remember.
Yeah, we had a town hall meeting with the site. It was the coaches, there was students, there was teachers and staffs, and during that meeting, that was the preferred locations at that time.
Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why?
I think it was because they want to run at that time. There was no discussion about what to do with the existing pool, and by using that pool, we can use as an interim so that the student wouldn't have to relocate and can still use that pool during construction.
That's right. Okay, so they were planning on using the existing pool during
That's
the
correct.
construction.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So with the option 1C, going down to further, another size down to 33 meters, can save a little bit more, about $1 million, so that brings the overall cost down to about $20.5 million project cost. And going over to option 2A, existing pool location. Now this one, then you will have to, there is some inconvenience that may have to have the functions at another locations while this construction takes place, but it does save additional money by moving into this location so that you don't have to reroute the gas line or the power to the new building 500. So in this option, you can save about $700,000, and it's for a 50-meter. That probably runs a little bit shy under $21 million. And then same thing for 38, you can save a little bit more, bring us down to 20. And then at 33, you have to save a $1.5 million and bring it down to $20 million for this option. And finally, the last option 3, where we rotate the building 90 degrees so that the building is now parallel and above the high water table. In this option here, 50-meter, saving possible $1 million. So the overall project is 20.5. As you go down 38, you could save possibly 1.7, and then bring it down to under 20 with this option. And finally, this one is probably the one that saves the most, roughly $2 million, 1.9, and then you can get it for 19.7 project cost. And having said that, here's kind of take a look at the overall schedule, where it stands, how it started, where we at today, what the yellow line is. Hypothetically, if there was a green light to move forward, we can possibly get this moving forward in January of 25, get a submit DSA approval by summer, and then bid award in fall, and then have this completed in 27, right before the Olympics in 28. And there's also a possibility to fast track this if the board wants us to do further study to maybe accelerate the demolition package, and then so you can get buy some escalation cost by shortening the midway construction cost. And that is concludes the presentations. Any questions you guys have?
Just one clarifying, if I could. When you talk about accelerating the demolition package, that would be if we put the pool where the existing pool is now, correct? Would that be the acceleration, or are you talking about
Just general demolition, wherever we decide the project goes, so that you shorten the construction period by starting it earlier.
So you do the demolition before you're out of DSA?
Yeah.
That would be what you propose? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So are these 50-meter pool estimates, are those based on the Murtha pool? Are they all based on Murtha, or none of? I don't see Murtha anywhere.
Yeah, these are based on Murtha.
They're all based on Murtha. Okay. So Murtha does a 33, does a 38, okay. All right. Trustees, who has the first list of questions? No? Nothing? We need a second? Yeah. Just one sec. We'll wait until somebody's ready with the question. Trustee Vane?
Yeah, so the cost has gone up, and it seems like the longer we wait, the more that the cost would go up. Do you have a sense of how much, or the pace of the cost going up, what that looks like? Is it just in course with inflation?
Yeah, it's really hard to predict how much oil costs tomorrow, but then I think, Nick, can you speak to the percentage of escalation per quarter that you're seeing?
Hello, I'm Nick Maru, CEO for NEF. I think someone mentioned it earlier. I think you might have mentioned it. There was a statewide bond that passed for $10 billion. There was another $36 billion that passed in local bonds as well. There's a restricted trade community, and we follow it closely. We're outbidding every month. And what we're hearing from the trades is by the end of next year, it's going to be somewhere between 15 and 20%. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your estimate here is 15%, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's assuming construction would start around June, July. And what Bruce was mentioning is demolition is not overseen by DSA, so that would be something we could start early.
You can move the microphone if it's easier.
Yeah, sorry.
You don't hurt your neck or something.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was going to come back.
Anybody else? Trustee Page?
Can you go back a couple slides? Yes. Option 3A. Or that's good. So, like, how relevant is it to clear the flood zone, like the blue line, and then also the red line? Because this is the option to like shift it so that it doesn't impede. But like what issues would that cause in the future?
DSA just want us to have a certain clearance, from what the water table is. So we basically have to raise the entire building up. So therefore, there's a little bit of grading, there's retaining wall, and hence there's a little bit of a construction cost if you were to be within that flood area.
So you're recommending this one as opposed to the other two?
As a team, I think.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Question that I have, when the building is around the other side, there are two sets of bleachers, one at the north end of the pool and one on the west side of the pool. The west side remains, the building shifts around, we lose the north bleachers. Is there an opportunity to put those at the south end?
Yeah,
we can still have two sets of bleachers? Because
Yes,
I understand with swimming and water polo, you have different fields of play, and that when you do this, it's considered good form to have two different sets.
Yeah, we can look into that for the south side.
Okay, so that would be a possibility. Thank you.
I have a question, if you don't mind. I wanted to find out the cost that you've estimated here. Does it include like ancillary things such as like scoreboards, lighting, the water, the floating goals, and grab rails, or any kind of
Yeah, from the
video
last meeting,
requirements?
we heard the board's concern. We kept all the basic needs all included within these options here.
Okay,
So, yeah.
because I didn't want anything to be cut, like a shade covers included, or, okay, because I didn't want any surprise costs. Thank you.
Yeah, there really isn't much difference between the 50 and the 33, if you really look at it. But we did talk about not wanting to cut the quality of the, we don't want to cut down on deck space. We don't want to cut, we want to make sure that the experience is good for parents and spectators and swimmers and everybody. When you say removal of 2 shade shelters on the 33 meter, what, is that just because of the space
Yeah, that's
necessary?
shorter. Yeah, so therefore you don't need as much because then, yeah.
The one thing that I had shared in previous meetings is that I am thinking that we're trying to fit something in a spot that's kind of tight as it is. I want to make sure that we are able to make it so that people can access it well from the parking lot. Villa Park is unique because their pool is in the middle of the campus. And so I have security concerns, safety concerns about, people going onto the campus, and it's not like walled off or something directly to the pool itself. Like, are there costs built in for that as well? Or what I'm trying to say is that I'm concerned about like just the general public walking onto our campus during tournaments, and that they have access to the entire campus. Whereas, say, if you had it at Canyon or at Orange, the pool is kind of on the perimeter of the property. So, no, but I know it's not happening during school hours, but still, there are, they have access to areas in our schools that you normally would wall off. Like over at Canyon, they can't go into any other areas, right? And so I'm just, thinking about security in.
It's no different than baseball or soccer or football. People can wander all over.
I do believe the school site in collaboration with the district, is making the necessary measures, the appropriate measures, especially to keep our students safe. I do believe should be by the end of this year, establishing new walls and new gates and on the facade of the campus and or around the exit alongside the tennis courts to ensure that we don't have any uninvited guests to the school site. So I think that's important to consider as well. In regards as to, essentially trapping in potential visitors to the pool specifically, I think that's to be quite frank, an unusual request, because at least from the school sites I visited, that's not common indeed. And also, it's important to consider as well, and safety in regard to that. Only one enter, one exit. Also, how about the potential of using restrooms on campus, right? There's only one restroom on an aquatic center used only for our athletes, right? For potential visitors, how about restrooms, throughout the campus that should be open to potential visitors as well. So that's something that needs to be consideration too.
These are all things that have to be addressed by ADA requirements and DSA, and I think it's a fair question for you to ask staff to get that answer and how that's going to work, because obviously we've made some major investments into our campuses. We want to make sure that we protect everything that we've invested in on those campuses. So fair question, and if staff can answer that, that would be fantastic. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I think we all just sort of have the same. I would imagine. It's a lot of money, and so we have to really think about how we're going to do this. I think that when we talk about return on investment, I think that the whole issue of matching funds for me is a big deal. So I do think that we need to have another study session that's going to address some of the other issues, because the state of the pools is clear that it's pretty grim. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. We do need to consider what some of the funding sources are. What choices do we have? What are our funds that are available currently? And perhaps what kind of partnerships may be out there. We don't really know, I don't think, as a board, some of us do, some of us don't, what we actually have at our disposal to spend on this. And so it's really important that I've looked into a lot of these pools. Most of these pools are paid for by bonds. It's just the way it is. You don't pay for it out of your general fund. That's just generally not the way that it's done. So what do we have available? What are the funding sources and options? And I think it's really important to know where we stand financially and where that fits into the larger scope of our district needs. Because we do have a facilities master plan. And we do need to know what are some of those other projects that we have queued up, ready to go, that we want to do, and how does this fit into the larger picture? Because while a pool is incredibly important, we also have other needs that are very important too. So we need to make sure that we're not, cutting off our arm when we have, all sorts of other needs as well. So we need to have at least a study session on the fiscal aspect of this and the financial aspect and how we pay for it. Like I said, the matching funds is an issue for me because every dollar we invest right now into any of our high schools at this point, because of Measure S having exhausted our matching fund eligibility, every dollar we put in, we're paying it. Whereas when we invest our money, for instance, on a campus that has matching fund eligibility, for every $1 million we put in, we get $600,000 back. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So we're paying dollar for dollar for this pool, whereas if we're making investments on other campuses, we're not even close to paying dollar for dollar. And I really think that we as a board have an obligation to really look at that big picture to make sure that we are putting our money where it needs to go, meeting the needs of our students, but also understanding that our students aren't just one set of students, it's an entire district of students. And we need to make sure that we can actually make this investment, that we actually get a return on our investment, and that, in the long term, this is the best way to go. But I do think that this has been a really very good presentation. I think that it's really clear that we have some major issues with all of our pools. I can say I, for one, don't believe that we need 3 50-meter pools, so I don't know how anybody else feels, but we talk about each school, and we're going to have to be dealing with one school, and it can't be a situation where we say, well, if we do a 50-meter pool, we have to do 2 other ones. We can't afford that based on these numbers. There's just no way that's going to happen. So we have to make choices. And if Villa Park is the best place to do it, that's what we need to decide. But I think that we cannot make that decision without knowing what the fiscal reality is.
Understood. We will bring back a report with the options on ways to generate revenue to fund this pool, other pools. I mean, the report, I think, that Aquatic Design Group presented was concerning at best. And we have these issues at all of our pools, or the 3 pools at least. So we need to figure out how to deal with that and how to move forward. And so we'll bring that back to you.
Does anybody else have something to add? Trustee Vane.
I would just like to share that I've asked to tour all of the pools, and they're going to arrange that. So if any of the other trustees would like to join me, because I personally haven't seen them, and I'd like to check it out.
And it's just for the public. So if that happens, we will make sure that we do not have 4 or more together touring the pools at the same time.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, first and foremost, I think it'd be reasonable to thank the presenters for coming here today. And in regards to the Aquatic Center at Villa Park High School, I asked the board to have a vision. This is an investment not just for 4 years, but rather for 40 years to come. It's an investment into our generation, our next generation of aquatic athletes, many of whom have been begotten from Villa Park High School, many of whom also are Olympic athletes. In regards to the facilities master plan, I absolutely do agree with Trustee Erickson. We have, give or take, around $1 billion in needs for our elementary and middle school sites combined. But let's be quite frank here. If we were to cut from high school projects, such as our aquatic center at Villa Park High School and or El Medina and or Canyon Orange, we'll be sitting on our hands for the next 300 years. What our elementary school needs, what our middle school needs. I have a third-year-old sister, third grader at Serrano Elementary. I mean, our elementary schools are in a perilous state. Let's be frank here, absolutely. And I agree with Trustee Erickson. But again, if we're going to make cuts to our high school projects, we'll be sitting on our hands for the next 300 years. And don't take this as an endorsement or anything, but I do believe it should be up to the discretion of the voters as to how their money should be spent when the figure is over $1 billion for elementary schools and middle schools combined.
That is certainly an option. If we
Absolutely.
decided to put a bond on the ballot, the voters could decide if they want to fund a pool, and that would be an option potentially.
I'm not speaking specifically for the pool, but in regards to the facilities master plan,
But
because I believe
that is certainly an option.
Yes.
So do any of the trustees have any more comments or questions?
Well, I thought we were going to discuss the fiscal part about it in another meeting. So what you're saying, I understand, but I just want to make sure that it's clear why we're not talking about it is because we need to get more
Correct.
information in the future.
Well, that's what we're asking staff to give us more information so that we can have a better conversation about it.
Yeah, I think this is time for us to digest what we just learned, and then we can sit and think about it, and then we'll get the fiscal component, and then we can make a decision at the end.
But I do agree, we have to think about investing, and I agree. The question is, what is the best investment? And when we look at these numbers, we got to figure out, there's just not a lot of difference between the numbers. So we got to figure out what we're going to do. So anything else? Trustee Pelley.
Yeah, I think just in my head thinking about when all this information we are asking for the whole fiscal side of it, something that you guys both had mentioned over here. We have kind of the operating cost, the annual operating cost, which is a lot to think about. That doesn't include staff. That doesn't include if we need added security. as a site administrator, I think it is really scary that somebody could have access to the campus even on a Saturday, because I've walked around on the weekends and I see what happens, and I see the trash that's left, and I see other people where they shouldn't be, or, you know, dogs or whatever. And I just think those are additional things with that whole fiscal piece that we need to think about too, because there will be other added components, not just the staff we have now. Likely, we're going to probably need more. So those are other things just to think about. But it's a whole big picture, and I agree. It's a lot for us to think about, and we need to really take our time. It's a big decision. So thank you.
We just need to have our eyes open, and I agree. I mean, we have sports on campus all the time, so I know we can do it. It's just going to be, there's a cost to it. So we just need to know what that is. Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I did have one additional clarification. The MRFA contract is not within our scope. So as the pool size reduces, there is additional cost savings with the pool.
Okay, that was my question. That was my question earlier. Or not? I guess it wasn't my question. It was a comment that it doesn't go down. So are you saying that? Go ahead. You may be able to say it.
Maybe I'm wrong. I thought that part of the savings in the reduction in the cost included the reduction in the cost of the MRFA pool.
No.
Are you saying that the $20 million doesn't even include the MRFA pool?
The MRFA pool is not in our contract.
No, I heard
That's
that,
just
but
the
I want to
prep
get
work.
clarification.
Yeah. So the cost of, so as you reduce the pool size, the cost of the prep, which is in our contract, goes down, but additionally, the cost of the pool will go down.
So we need to get the cost of the MRFA pool and add it to the numbers that are here in this report tonight.
Yes.
So the $21,714,000 does not include the cost of the pool, which I can't remember how much it was, but it was 1.1 million. Okay.
Thank you for making that clarification.
I apologize. It is in the number.
I thought it was, because that was before people said that's how we were saving money, so now I'm confused.
Yeah.
And Tom, if you could go up to the mic, because I know you have that information, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Tom Wertanen, the senior PM, but the 15.8 that Bruce first presented is inclusive of the 1.1 million, not to exceed in the MRFA. So each time we're reducing the pool size, that MRFA cost is coming down.
Is that included in the numbers?
The MRFA reduction is included in the numbers, yes.
So
you good with that, Nick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I just want to
yeah.
make sure.
But again, it's in the 15.8 to begin with, and then that escalated, and then each time we're reducing that, it would be a reduction in the PO that you have with MRFA.
Right. Okay. So I just want to make sure. So this is an all-in number.
Yes.
Because what scares me is that now it sounded like it wasn't all-in.
No, I think what's missing is the makeup of that 15.8 was a slide that was once in the presentation, but it's not in there.
Okay.
No.
So are you sure that reduction, though? So for sure that reduction is in, because like I said, it's only $200,000 difference between like a 33 and a 38. And so that's what I was wondering is, it seems like a MRFA pool you'd be saving more than $200,000, but maybe I'm incorrect.
Well, the reduction, as Nick said, there's elements that we have to do to prepare it for the MRFA install. And so those costs are factored in. The entire slab that has to be poured and everything else, and the size of the excavation is factored in to that decrease in the cost.
Okay. I guess
It's an estimate at this point.
I would have expected it to go down more from a 38 to a 33. And so okay. All right. So this does include a 33 meter MRFA versus a 38 meter versus a 50.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Is it time to adjourn? We will adjourn the meeting at 7:38.